Willa didn't know her life was about to end in a bookstore wedged between fantasy and self-help, or that it would begin again in a stone fortress with a king who'd been waiting 30 years for her, and a power she never knew she had. What she did know was debt. The collection agency letter had arrived that morning, $52,000 in student debt, interest compounding daily. From a nursing degree she'd abandoned halfway through when Mom got sick, then never returned to after the funeral. 2 years of her life reduced to numbers she'd never escape, and the muscle memory of checking vitals on someone dying. Damaged goods. That's all you are. Jason's voice echoed in her head, from when she finally worked up the courage to leave him last week. The bruise under her cardigan throbbed in agreement. She was reshelving returns in the fantasy section, midnight shift at the bookstore after the diner closed, when her fingers found the gap. Not empty space between books, but something else. Shimmer, like heat rising from pavement. And beneath it, a pull. Gentle but insistent, an invisible thread wrapped around her sternum. She reached into the shimmer. Suddenly, the bookstore vanished. She didn't scream. She'd learned to swallow screams years ago, but terror clawed up her throat as she fell through impossible space. Colors that shouldn't exist. Air that tasted like lightning. The pull in her chest dragging her forward until impact. Hard stone against her palms, cold shocking through her system. She gasped, vision swimming, heart slamming against bruised ribs. She was inside a room with stone walls, and were those torches? And crouched a few feet away, watching her carefully, was a man who looked like he could break her in half without trying. He was massive, easily 6'5", with shoulders that belonged on a linebacker. Dark hair fell past his collar, and his face was all brutal angles softened by a mouth that looked like it knew how to smile but had forgotten the habit. He wore leather and furs like he'd walked out of the fantasy book she'd just been shelving. And his eyes were amber. Not brown gold, but true amber. The color of honey held up to sunlight, with an animal brightness that made something primal in her hindbrain whisper predator. Those eyes were locked on her face with an intensity that made her want to run. "Easy," he said, his voice low and careful. "You're safe." Willa scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the wall. "Where am I?" "The Greyvale Citadel." He stayed exactly where he was, hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm Zane, Alpha King of the Western Territories, and you—" Something flickered across his face, raw and unguarded. "You're my mate." Her laugh came out sharp. "Sure. And I'm the Queen of Narnia." She scanned for exits. One door, one massive window showing a mountain landscape that definitely wasn't Seattle. "Look, I don't know what this is. Some kind of Renaissance fair, kidnapping situation, but I'm not interested. Just tell me how to get back and we can forget this happened." "I'm not lying to you." Something like confusion flickered across his face. "You can't feel it? The bond?" "The only thing I feel is extremely done with this day." But even as she said it, Willa became aware of something warm in her chest. That same pull from the bookstore, but stronger now. Insistent. Zane tilted his head slightly, still watching her with that unnerving focus. Then his nostrils flared, like he was scenting the air, and his expression darkened. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "You're not." He moved slightly, and she flinched despite herself. He froze, hands raised. "I won't touch you, but I can smell blood. And fear. The kind that lives in your bones." Willa's throat tightened. She hated how exposed she felt under his gaze, like he could see past all her carefully constructed walls. "I don't know what kind of game this is," she said, quietly. "But I'm not playing. I've had enough of men who think they can—" Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced it steady. "Just send me home. Please." Zane was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. can't send you home. Not immediately. The portals are one way. They need time to reset before they can reverse. Usually about a moon cycle. A month? Panic spiked through her. I have shifts, bills. No, there has to be another way. There isn't. I'm sorry. He sat back on his heels, putting more distance between them. But you'll be safe here. I swear it. You'll have your own quarters, food, anything you need. And when the portal resets, I'll help you go back if that's what you want. Of course that's what I want. But even as she said it, Willa felt something twist in her chest. Because what was she going back to? Crushing debt. The constant fear of running into Jason at the grocery store. A life that felt like drowning in slow motion. You can't seriously be considering this, she told herself. He's a stranger. This is insane. But he was still watching her with those amber eyes, and she didn't see the calculation or possessiveness she'd learned to recognize in Jason's gaze. Zane looked at her like she was a gift that had unexpectedly landed in his bedroom, and he wasn't sure if he was allowed to keep. Before we continue, please take a second to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. Can I ask you something? He asked gently. When you think about going back to your life before the portal, does it feel like relief? Or does it feel like returning to a cage? That's not fair, she whispered. I know, but I think you need someone to ask. He shifted slightly, still maintaining that careful distance. I've ruled long enough to recognize someone who's been in survival mode for a very long time. Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Why would you help me? She asked instead, her voice barely audible. You don't even know me. Because you're my mate. He said it simply, like it explained everything. Because every instinct I have is telling me to protect you. And because... His jaw tightened. Because I know what it's like to feel trapped. I don't believe in fate, Willa said quietly. Or soulmates. Or any of this. You don't have to. Zane rose slowly to his full height, and she realized exactly how much power he'd been holding back while crouched. But you're here for a month regardless. Let me give you space to heal. Your own quarters, food, anything you need. She studied him, the careful distance he maintained, the way his hands stayed loose and visible, the patience in his amber eyes. Okay, she said, but I'm staying out of your way. This is temporary. Willa, her head snapped up. How do you know my name? He paused, something unreadable crossing his face. The bond. When you came through the portal, I felt everything. Your name, your fear, fragments of who you are. That's... She didn't know how to finish that sentence. Overwhelming, I know. His expression turned careful again, giving her space to process. But it doesn't change anything. You're still free to leave when the month is up. The bond doesn't trap you, Willa. It just... waits. The quarters were impossibly large. The bedroom alone could have swallowed her entire Seattle studio. Stone walls softened with tapestries, a bed piled with furs, a window overlooking mountains that seemed to go on forever. A woman named Vera brought food, roasted meat and vegetables that settled warmly in her stomach, unlike the ramen and canned soup she'd been living on. Willa ate quickly, then collapsed into the bed and slept for 14 hours straight. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the scent of pine drifting on cold air. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back, and she sat up, half expecting to find this had all been a stress-induced hallucination. A knock at the door made her tense. Yes? It's Zane. May I come in? She pulled a fur around her shoulders. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, and crossed to open the door. He stood in the hallway looking unfairly good for this early in the morning, his hair damp like he'd just bathed. I thought you might want breakfast, he said, gesturing to the tray in his hands. and to talk about how you'll spend your time here. You brought me breakfast yourself? I wanted to see you, he said simply. May I? She stepped aside to let him in, watching as he set the tray on the small table by the window. Warm bread, honey, fruit she didn't recognize, and something that smelled like coffee but richer. I've been thinking, Zane said as she sat down to eat. You're going to be here for 4 weeks. You could spend it hiding in this room, or you could spend it getting stronger. Willa looked up, sharply. Stronger how? I could teach you to fight. He leaned against the wall, careful to keep distance between them. Self-defense, combat, how to make sure no one ever hurts you again. Her breath caught. Why do you suggest that? Because I can see you need it. His amber eyes held hers. You flinch when I move too fast, and your hand goes to your ribs when you think I'm not looking. Someone hurt you, Willa, and I can't change that, but I can give you the tools to make sure it never happens again. Something hot and uncomfortable lodged in her throat. I don't need pity. This isn't pity. This is me offering you power. He pushed off the wall. Think about it. Training starts at dawn if you want it. He left before she could respond. Willa stared at the closed door, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to refuse out of sheer stubbornness, but another part, the part that still felt Jason's hand around her wrist, that carried the weight of every time she'd been too weak or too scared to fight back, that part whispered yes. She spent the rest of the day exploring the citadel. It was vast, a fortress carved into the mountainside with corridors that seemed to go on forever. She found training yards where warriors sparred with brutal efficiency, kitchens where staff prepared meals for hundreds, a library that made her chest ache with longing. Everyone she passed bowed slightly or nodded in acknowledgement. Word had spread quickly, apparently. The human who'd fallen through a portal, allegedly the Alpha King's mate. She hated the whispers but understood them. She was an anomaly here, something that didn't fit their world. In the library, she found a woman about her age shelving books. Dark hair, kind eyes, and a smile that seemed genuine. You must be Willa, the woman said. I'm Celeste. I help manage the archives. This place is incredible, Willa said, gesturing at the floor-to-ceiling shelves. It's my sanctuary. Celeste pulled down a leather-bound volume. If you're looking for information about our world, this is a good place to start. History, customs, the nature of mate bonds, it's all here. Willa took the book gratefully. Thank you. And if you need someone to talk to, Celeste added quietly, someone who isn't the intimidating Alpha King, I'm usually here. The simple offer, no judgment, no expectation, made Willa's throat close up. She'd forgotten what uncomplicated kindness felt like. I might take you up on that. That evening, Willa read the book Celeste had given her. It explained shifter culture in clinical terms, the pack hierarchy, the importance of the mate bond, the magic that bound their society together. But between the lines, she read something else. Loneliness. Shifters mated for life, and those who never found their mate often lived half-lives, always searching for something just out of reach. She thought about Zane, about the way he'd looked at her when he said, "You're my mate." Not possessive, but wondering, like he'd been searching for her his whole life and couldn't quite believe she was real. Like he was afraid if he reached for her too quickly, she might disappear. Her chest tightened. How long had he been waiting? How many years had he lived that half-life the book described, walking through his days with something vital missing? She showed up at dawn. The training yard was empty except for Zane, who was running through what looked like a weapons drill with lethal grace. He moved like violence was an art form, all controlled power and brutal efficiency. When he saw her, he set down his blade and smiled. You came. Don't make me regret it. His smile widened. Wouldn't dream of it. Come here. The The first week was humbling. Zane started with basics: how to stand, how to move, how to break someone's grip. He never touched her without asking first, never crowded her space, and his patience was infinite. When she got frustrated, which was often, he'd simply reset and start again. "You're thinking too much," he said on the third day, after she'd failed to break his hold for the 10th time. His hand was warm around her wrist, firm, but not tight. "Stop trying to outthink it. Just move." "Easy for you to say when you're built like a—" She gestured vaguely at all of him. Zane laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You think size is everything? I've seen warriors half my size take down opponents twice theirs. It's about leverage, speed, using their strength against them." He released her wrist, and she felt the ghost of his touch lingering on her skin. He stepped back, settling into a ready stance. "Again." She went at him again, and this time when he grabbed her wrist, she twisted exactly like he'd shown her, dropped her weight, rotated her arm against his thumb. His grip broke. She stumbled back, breathless and surprised. "There," Zane said, and his grin was bright enough to make her forget she was sweating and sore. "You're stronger than you think." She became aware of how close they were standing, how his chest rose and fell from the exertion, the way his eyes tracked her movement with something that looked almost like pride. By the end of the first week, Willa's body ached in ways she'd forgotten were possible. But it was a good ache, the kind that came from use rather than abuse. She was sleeping better too, dreamlessly, her body too exhausted for nightmares. The second week brought new challenges. Zane introduced weapons, staffs first, then knives, teaching her not just how to hold them, but how to move with them, how to make them extensions of her body. "You're a natural," he said one morning after she'd successfully disarmed him. "Have you trained before?" "No, but I'm motivated." She met his eyes. "I'm tired of being afraid." Something fierce and proud flickered across his face. "You don't have to be afraid here. Not ever again." The promise in his voice made her chest ache. It was during the second week that she started noticing other things, small gestures that had nothing to do with training. Fresh flowers appeared on her windowsill every morning, mountain blooms in shades of purple and gold, arranged with care. She never saw who left them, but she knew. One evening, she returned to her quarters to find a new cloak laid across her bed. Soft wool lined with fur, dyed deep blue, far finer than anything she'd owned in her old life. When she asked Vera about it, the woman smiled. "His Majesty had it made for you, said you needed something warmer for the mountain air." Willa ran her fingers over the fabric, something warm unfurling in her chest. The next morning at training, she wore the cloak. Zane's eyes lit up when he saw it, tracked over the blue fabric with something raw and hungry before he shuttered it away. He didn't say anything, just smiled, soft, almost shy, and handed her a practice sword. Their training sessions became the highlight of her days, not just because she was learning, but because of him. The way he moved, the way he explained things with infinite patience, his voice going low and rough when he stepped close to adjust her stance. The way his eyes tracked her like she was the only thing in the world worth watching. And the tension. God, the tension was becoming unbearable. During grappling exercises, their bodies would press together, and she'd feel the heat of him, the controlled strength, the way his breath would catch when her hands found purchase on his shoulders. Once, she'd managed to flip him, pure luck and leverage, and ended up straddling his chest, both of them breathing hard, her thighs bracketing his ribs. The look in his eyes had made her stomach flip, heat pooling low in her belly. He'd lifted her off him gently, but his hands had lingered on her waist just a moment too long. "Good work," he'd said, his voice rough. Then he'd put distance between them and change the subject. But Willa had seen the desire in his eyes, the way he looked at her mouth like he was starving, the restraint that was clearly costing him, day by day. By the third week, the tension between them was impossible to ignore. Willa had taken a blade to the shoulder during a particularly aggressive sparring session with one of Zane's guards, and Zane had immediately called a halt to training. "Let me see," he said, his voice tight with concern. "It's just a scratch." "Willa." The command in his tone made her still. Something flickered in his eyes, gold bleeding into the amber. "Let me see." She pulled aside the collar of her training tunic, revealing the shallow cut across her shoulder. It wasn't deep, barely bleeding, but Zane's expression darkened anyway. His nostrils flared slightly, and she realized with a start that he was scenting her blood. "Come with me." He took her hand and led her to a small room off the training yard, a healer's station with supplies and a bench. "Sit." She sat, watching as he gathered clean water, bandages, and a pot of something that smelled like herbs. His movements were controlled, precise, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked. When he knelt in front of her, his eyes level with hers, her breath caught. "This might sting," he warned, dampening a cloth. The first touch of water against her cut made her hiss. Zane's hand immediately moved to cup her uninjured shoulder, steadying her. "Sorry, almost done." She forced herself to breathe normally, but it was impossible with him this close. She could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell pine and winter wind, and something uniquely him. His fingers were gentle as they cleaned the wound, and when he leaned in to examine it more closely, his breath ghosted across her skin. "It's not deep," he murmured, reaching for the salve. Then his gaze caught on something else, the yellowing bruise on her ribs, visible where her tunic had shifted. His hand froze. "That's from before." "It's healing," she said quietly. His fingers hovered over the bruise. "He did this to you." His voice had gone rough, dangerous. The gold in his eyes spread, wolf rising to the surface. "If I ever—" He stopped, closed his eyes, visibly wrestling for control. When he opened them again, the gold had receded, but the intensity remained. "You're safe now. I swear it." His hand moved back to her shoulder wound, spreading the cool ointment across her skin with devastating gentleness. The contrast between his protective rage and his careful touch made her throat tight. "Does it hurt?" Zane asked, his eyes flicking up to hers. "No." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "It feels good." Something flared in his eyes, his hand stilled on her shoulder, thumb resting against her collarbone. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then his gaze dropped to her mouth, and she saw him swallow hard. "I should bandage this," he said, but he didn't move. "Probably." "Willa." Her name was almost a plea. His other hand came up to cup, her jaw, tilting her face toward his. "You're making this very difficult." "Making what difficult?" "Keeping my distance." His thumb traced her lower lip, and her breath stuttered. "All I want to do is—" He leaned in, and she found herself leaning too. His forehead touched hers, noses almost brushing, his breath warm against her mouth. So close. One of them just had to close the distance. But her heart was suddenly hammering for a different reason, old fears rising up. Jason's face flashed behind her eyes, the first time he'd kissed her, how gentle he'd been before everything changed. Zane must have felt her tense because he immediately pulled back, putting inches between them, though his hand remained gentle on her jaw. "I'm sorry," she breathed. "I just—" "Don't apologize." His voice was rough but tender. "You're not ready, I understand." He pressed a kiss to her forehead instead. "I can wait, Willa, as long as you need." He finished bandaging her shoulder in silence, but his hands never lost their gentleness, and when he helped her to her feet, his eyes held only understanding. It made her want him even more. One night, Willa had been exploring the citadel after training when she heard raised voices from what looked like a council chamber. The door was ajar, and she recognized Zane's voice immediately. "I don't care about the politics, Garrett. I'm not taking a mate just to appease the northern packs." "With respect, Your Majesty, you already have a mate." An older man's voice, patient but firm. "The human girl. Everyone can smell the bond. She hasn't accepted it yet, and I won't force her hand. Your cousin is using your unmarked status as ammunition." A woman's voice this time. "Demis is gathering support, arguing that an unmated alpha is too weak to lead. If you don't solidify the bond soon, then let him argue." Zane's voice was hard. "I will not rush Willa into something she's not ready for. She's been hurt, badly. She needs time, and I'm going to give it to her. Even if it costs you the throne?" A pause. Then quieter, but no less firm. "I've waited 30 years for her. I can wait a little longer. Politics be damned." Silence fell. Then Garrett spoke again, softer. "You really love her. She's my mate." The rawness in Zane's voice made Willa's breath catch. "She's been here 3 weeks, and I've watched her transform. She's getting stronger every day, remembering who she is beneath all the fear. And when she looks at me..." He stopped. "I won't sacrifice her healing for political convenience. Not for Demis, not for the northern packs, not for anyone. She deserves better than that. And if the council forces your hand, then they'll learn I'm more stubborn than they thought." Willa's eyes burned. She backed away from the door quietly, her heart pounding. She'd known, on some level, that Zane cared about her, but hearing him say it, hearing the absolute certainty in his voice, the way he prioritized her well-being over political pressure, it broke something open inside her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying his words, feeling the bond pull at her chest like it was trying to drag her to him. Around midnight, she gave up and pulled on the blue cloak, heading for the battlements. The night air was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. She was staring at the mountains when she heard footsteps behind her. "Can't sleep?" Zane's voice, warm and familiar. She turned to find him a few feet away, keeping that careful distance. "Too much on my mind. Want to talk about it?" Willa hesitated. "I heard you today, in the council chamber." His expression shifted, surprise, then resignation. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." She moved closer to him. "Your cousin is using me against you, making you look weak." "That's not your problem." "But it is, isn't it?" She searched his face. "Because I'm your mate. Whether I've accepted it or not, the bond exists. And by staying, uncommitted, I'm putting you in danger." "Willa, I'm not saying I'm ready to bond." She held up a hand. "But I need you to know that I'm not using you. I'm not staying here to manipulate you or take advantage. Her voice cracked. "I heard what you said to the council, that you won't rush me even if it costs you politically, and I don't know what to do with that kind of loyalty." Zane closed the distance between them in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You don't have to do anything with it," he said quietly. "That's my choice, Willa. How I handle my council, my cousin, that's not your burden to carry." "But it should be." Tears burned her eyes. "You're risking so much for me, and I'm too scared to even..." She gestured helplessly between them. "I'm too broken to give you what you need." "You're not broken." His voice was fierce. "You're healing. There's a difference." "What if I can't heal fast enough? What if your cousin moves against you and it's my fault?" "Then I'll deal with him." Zane lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent. But I won't rush you. I won't let fear push you into something you're not ready for. Willa leaned into his palm, letting herself have this moment of contact. You're too good for me. I'm really not. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm a king who's made more mistakes than I can count, who carries the weight of every life lost under my rule, who spent years blaming himself for his sister's death. The pain in his voice made her chest tight. Your sister? His jaw worked. Lillian, she was everything bright in this place. She loved to explore the mountains. He swallowed hard. 5 winters ago, she went out alone during a storm. We searched for 3 days. I'm sorry, Zane. I should have been with her, should have insisted someone go along, but she was headstrong, and I thought, his voice cracked, I thought she'd be fine, that she knew these mountains as well as any of us. Willa's hand found his, fingers threading together. That wasn't your fault. Accidents happen, even in places we think we know. I was her brother, her alpha. It was my job to keep her safe. His eyes had gone distant. Some days I can still hear her laugh in these halls. Zane. She squeezed his hand. You can't protect everyone from everything. Believe me, I know what it's like to blame yourself for things beyond your control. His eyes refocused on her, and she saw the understanding there. They both carried guilt that wasn't theirs to bear. We're both scarred, Willa, he said quietly. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're exactly what each other needs. The vulnerability in his face, this powerful king showing her his deepest wound, undid something in her. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a question pressed against his lips. But Zane responded immediately, a low sound rumbling in his chest as his hand slid into her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Willa's hands fisted in his shirt as she melted into his heat. He kissed like he fought, with controlled intensity that hinted at savage depths beneath. His mouth moved over hers with devastating thoroughness, like he was memorizing the taste of her, the feel of her. When his tongue traced her lower lip, she opened for him with a gasp, and the kiss turned hungry, desperate. His fingers tightened in her hair, and she arched into him, feeling the hard planes of his body, the barely leash strength in the way he held her. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. Could feel the tremor in his hands, the restraint it cost him not to take more than she was ready to give. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zane rested his forehead against hers. His pupils were blown wide, gold bleeding through the amber. That was overdue, Willa finished breathlessly, and I'm sorry it took me so long. Don't apologize. His voice was rough. You set the pace, always. I'll follow wherever you lead. She pulled back to look at him, at this impossibly patient man who'd given her space when she needed it, and protection when she didn't know how to ask, who'd taught her to be strong again without making her feel weak for needing the lessons. The portal, he said quietly, and something in his voice made her chest tighten. It reopens in 5 days, at the end of the moon cycle. Her heart stuttered. 5 days. The words sat between them like a chasm. I know, she whispered. His arms tightened around her, and she felt the careful control in the way he held her, like he was trying not to hold too tight, trying not to let his desperation show. If you want to go back, his voice was rough. I'll make sure you get home safely. I'll give you anything you need to rebuild your life there. The offer was genuine. She could hear it in every word. He would let her go, even though it would destroy him. Stay. The word was right there, pressing against her teeth. I want to stay, but saying it felt too big, too permanent, too terrifying. What if she wasn't ready? What if she was making the same mistake again, throwing herself into the wrong kind of relationship. Zane, her voice broke. I don't know. He pressed his lips to her temple, and she felt him shaking. It's okay. You don't have to decide right now. But they both knew 3 days wasn't much time. She buried her face in his chest, breathing him in. His heart thundered beneath her ear, and she held him tighter, trying to memorize this moment. The warmth of him, the safety, the feeling of being wanted without being owned. They stood together on the battlements until the sky began to lighten, wrapped in each other and the fragile, aching uncertainty of what came next. The 4th week brought a shift in the Citadel's atmosphere. Guards moved through the halls with hands closer to their weapons. Conversations cut off mid-sentence when Willa rounded corners. And Zane, who'd been present and focused during their training sessions, started watching the doorways more than he watched her. What's wrong? She asked one morning after he'd corrected the same stance 3 times without seeming to notice she'd already fixed it. Nothing you need to worry about. Zane. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Demise is moving faster than we anticipated, gathering supporters, making claims about my fitness to rule. His jaw tightened. It's going to come to a head soon. What kind of head? The kind where he'll challenge me directly, a formal challenge for the throne. Zane's jaw tightened. It's pack law. Any blood relative can issue the challenge. We fight. Winner takes the throne. That's barbaric. It's tradition. He looked at her. And it's unavoidable now. He's backed me into a corner. Willa's stomach twisted. When? Soon. Maybe days. He caught her hand. But don't worry about it. I've been training for combat my entire life. Demise is strong, but I'm stronger. She wanted to believe him, but something in his expression made her uneasy. That afternoon, she sought out Celeste in the library. I need to know about formal challenges, Willa said. Everything. Celeste's expression turned grave. You heard about Demise. Zane told me, but he's not telling me everything, is he? Celeste hesitated, then pulled down a heavy tome. Formal challenges follow specific rules. It's a fight to submission or death, overseen by the pack elders. But there's a loophole that challengers sometimes exploit. What kind of loophole? They're allowed to bring aids, substances that enhance their strength or weaken their opponent. Technically forbidden, but hard to prove unless you catch them in the act. Celeste met her eyes. Demis is known for playing dirty, Willa. If he challenges Zane, he won't fight fair. Cold dread settled in Willa's stomach. So what do? We watch, we wait, and we hope Zane is as good as he thinks he is. That night, Willa found Zane in his study, poring over maps and documents. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body. You need to sleep, she said from the doorway. Can't. Too much to prepare. She crossed the room and took the papers from his hands, setting them aside. Then at least take a break. He looked up at her, and something in his expression cracked. I'm trying to keep you safe, Willa. Trying to make sure that whatever happens with Demis, you'll be protected. But I feel like I'm failing on all fronts. You're not failing. She cupped his face in her hands. You've given me everything. Strength, safety, a chance to remember who I am. She paused. You've given me hope, Zane. I didn't think I'd ever feel that again. His hands came up to cover hers. If something happens to me, don't. Listen to me. His eyes were intense. If Demis wins, if I fall, I need you to run. Celeste knows the portal location, knows the timing. She'll get you there safely. You can go home, back to your world where Demis can't touch you. I'm not running. Willa. I said I'm not running. Her voice was firm. I've spent my whole life running from things that scared me. From Jason, from debt, from every hard choice I've ever faced. I'm done running, Zane. Whatever happens, we face it together. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her neck, and she felt him shaking. This strong, powerful man who carried a kingdom on his shoulders, trembling in her arms. I love you, he said against her skin. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too. The words came easily, surprising her. And we're going to get through this. Whatever Demise throws at us, we'll handle it. She felt him nod. Then he lifted his head and kissed her, deep and desperate and full of weeks of restrained hunger. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head back, and she opened for him, meeting his intensity with her own. His hands remained carefully above her waist, even as the kiss deepened. Always so controlled, so careful not to push. She broke the kiss, breathing hard, and reached for the hem of her shirt. His hand caught her wrist gently. Willa, he said, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure? In answer, she guided his hand to her waist, then higher, holding his gaze. I'm sure. She pulled him closer, her other hand sliding to the back of his neck. I want this. I want you. He lifted her then, closer to the fireplace, laying her down with a gentleness that made her throat tight. His hands trembled slightly as they traced the curve of her waist, her hip, like he was afraid she might disappear. I've imagined this, he breathed, pressing kisses along her jaw, her throat. But nothing could have prepared me for how it feels to actually touch you like this. She arched into him, her fingers tangling in his hair. Then stop imagining and touch me. They came together urgent and raw, both of them needing the physical confirmation that they were alive, together, real. But beneath the desperation was something achingly tender. The way Zane whispered her name, the way his hands learned every curve and hollow of her body with reverent attention, the way he watched her face, checking in with his eyes even when words failed them both. Willa had forgotten what it felt like to be touched with wonder instead of ownership. Every kiss, every caress felt like Zane was telling her, you're precious, you're chosen, you're mine, and I'm yours. When she shattered in his arms, he held her through it, murmuring words in a language she didn't know but understood in her bones. Afterward, tangled together in front of the fire, Zane traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch impossibly gentle. Willa. His voice was soft, uncertain in a way she'd never heard from him. Something vulnerable and hopeful flickered in his eyes. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her cheeks. Willa Andrews, will you stay with me? Will you accept the mate bond and become part of this pack, this kingdom, this life I'm trying to build? The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and promise. She could see in his eyes that he already knew, that this moment of connection had told him everything, but he needed to hear it from her lips. Ask me tomorrow, she said softly, covering his hands with hers. After we deal with Demise, after we know we have a future to build, after we've won. Tomorrow, then. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. But I already know your answer. Cocky, she murmured against his chest. Hopeful. His arms tightened around her. They fell asleep there by the fire, wrapped in each other, neither of them knowing that tomorrow would change everything. Willa woke to the sound of breaking glass and Zane's roar of fury. She had a split second to process. Armed men pouring through the window, Zane already shifting into his massive black wolf, the glint of steel in the firelight, before instinct took over. She rolled, her bare feet hitting cold stone as she grabbed the knife Zane had taught her to keep close. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she came up in a fighting stance, the weight of the blade familiar in her palm. One of the intruders lunged for her, all black leather and cold eyes, and she didn't think, just moved. Sidestep like Zane taught her, slash across the reaching arm, pivot and drive her elbow into his throat. He went down choking, and she felt the savage satisfaction of it. But there were more. 6, 7, too many. And they weren't trying to kill her. Their hands grabbed for her arms, her waist, trying to pin and drag her toward the window. One caught her wrist and she twisted, bit down hard on his hand until she tasted copper. He cursed and released her. Zane fought like a demon, tearing through attackers with savage efficiency. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. A hand fisted in her hair from behind, yanking her head back so hard her vision sparked. She screamed, driving her elbow backward, hearing the crunch of impact. But another set of arms locked around her waist, lifting her off her feet. She thrashed, kicked backward with her heel, connected with something that made a man grunt in pain. "Get her through the window, now!" Zane's howl split the air, anguished, enraged, and she saw him lunge toward her, but two men intercepted him, driving him back with silver-tipped spears. "Zane!" Her voice was raw. Then something cracked against the side of her head, and the world tilted sideways. Pain exploded behind her eyes. Her limbs went heavy, uncooperative. She was dimly aware of being lifted, carried, of cold night air hitting her skin as they hauled her through the window. Zane's howl followed her into the darkness, pure anguish and fury, the last thing she registered before unconsciousness dragged her under. She came to slowly, her head pounding. Stone walls, dim light, the smell of damp and decay. A dungeon? Willa sat up carefully, fighting nausea. She was in a cell, iron bars separating her from a larger chamber where two men stood talking in low voices. One of them she recognized from portraits in the Citadel. Demise. He had Zane's muscular build, but none of his warmth, with cold blue eyes and a cruel mouth. "She's awake," Demise said, turning to look at her. "Good. I was worried we'd hit her too hard. Where am I?" Willa kept her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "My stronghold, about 50 miles north of Greyvale." Demise approached the bars, studying her like she was an interesting specimen. "My dear cousin is quite attached to you, which makes you very valuable. He'll kill you for this. He'll try." Demise smiled. "But I've been planning this for a long time. You see, Zane is stronger than me in a fair fight, so I'm going to make sure the fight isn't fair." He pulled a vial from his pocket, dark liquid that seemed to absorb the light. "Wolfsbane, concentrated. 1 dose, and even an alpha goes down. I'll challenge him formally, and when he accepts, my man will slip this into his water. By the time we fight, he'll be weak as a newborn pup." "That's cheating. That's strategy." Demise tucked the vial away. "And once I kill him, I'll have you executed as a traitor. 2 problems solved, and the throne is mine. The pack will have no choice but to accept me." He turned away, and Willa's mind raced. She had to warn Zane, had to find a way out of here before Demis could enact his plan. The cell was solid stone, the bars iron. No obvious weaknesses. But the lock, she could see it from here, a simple mechanism. If she could reach it, if she had something to pick it with. Her hand went to her hair. The pins Vera had given her, decorative things she'd been wearing for weeks now, were made of metal, thin enough to work in a lock if she was careful. Willa waited until Demise and his companion left. Then she pulled out a hairpin and got to work. It took her 2 hours. Her fingers cramped, the pin bent twice, and she had to stop whenever footsteps approached. But finally, the lock clicked open. Willa slipped out of the cell, her heart pounding. She needed to find a way out, to get back to Greyvale, to warn Zane. The stronghold was a maze of corridors, all stone and shadow. She moved quietly, using everything Zane had taught her about stealth and awareness. She was almost to what looked like an exit when a hand clamped over her mouth. Willa fought on instinct, bringing her elbow back hard. Whoever held her grunted but didn't let go. Easy, a voice hissed in her ear. I'm trying to help you. She stilled. The hand released her, and she spun to find a young man with copper-colored hair and familiar amber eyes. Who are you? Braden, one of Zane's guards. His expression was grim. But we have a problem. Demi's issued the formal challenge an hour ago. The fight is happening at sunset. If we don't get back before then Zane walks into a trap. Willa's stomach dropped. We need to move. Now. They ran through the stronghold and burst out into cold mountain air. 2 horses waited, already saddled, stamping nervously. Can you ride? Braden asked, swinging onto one. I'll manage. Willa grabbed the saddle horn and hauled herself up, her body protesting. She'd ridden once, maybe twice in her life, but adrenaline would have to make up for skill. They rode hard, the horses' hooves pounding against rocky terrain. Braden led them along a narrow mountain path, faster than the route Demis's men had taken her, he explained, but treacherous. Willa clung to the saddle, her thighs burning, branches whipping past. Every minute felt like an eternity. The sun was already sliding toward the horizon, painting the sky orange and gold. They were running out of time. They reached Greyvale, just as the sun was touching the horizon. The challenge ground was a natural amphitheater carved into the mountain, packed earth ringed by stone, surrounded by hundreds of shifters pressed shoulder to shoulder. The crowd's energy was electric, savage, the air thick with the scent of anticipation and bloodlust. In the center, Zane stood facing Demis. Even from a distance, Willa could see something was catastrophically wrong. Zane swayed slightly on his feet, his skin too pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. His movements were sluggish, defensive, like he was moving through water. The wolfsbane. They'd already given it to him. No, Willa breathed, ice flooding her veins. She shoved through the crowd, bodies resisting, growls of protest following her. Stop! Stop the fight! Heads turned. Zane's eyes found hers across the distance, relief and terror and desperate love all at once blazing in his gaze. Then Demis struck. His fist connected with Zane's ribs with a sickening crack that Willa felt in her own chest. Zane staggered, barely got his guard up in time to deflect the follow-up blow aimed at his throat. Blood already dripped from his nose, his lips split. The fight was brutal. Demis circled like a predator who knew his prey was wounded, grinning, taking his time. Every punch landed with wet, meaty thuds. Zane blocked what he could, but his reflexes were half a second too slow, his body betraying him. When Demis's elbow caught him across the jaw, Zane went down on one knee, spitting blood onto the packed earth. The crowd roared, some in bloodlust, others in dismay. Get up, Willa whispered, her fingernails cutting into her palms. Please get up. Zane rose, shaking, refusing to stay down. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, dripped from his mouth. But he raised his fists again, swaying. Every breath looked like agony. Demis laughed. This is pathetic. The great Alpha, brought low by a little flower. He circled closer. I expected more of a fight. He lunged again, and this time his fist drove into Zane's solar plexus. The air left Zane's lungs in a horrible wheeze. He doubled over, and Demis brought his knee up into Zane's face. The crack of bone was audible even over the crowd. Zane hit the ground hard, blood spraying across the earth. He's been poisoned, Willa screamed, her voice raw and desperate. Wolfsbane Demis poisoned him. The crowd erupted, shouts of outrage, denials, confusion. The elders surged forward, but they were too far away, the crowd too dense. Demis wasn't waiting. He shifted mid-ring, bones cracking and reforming, fur rippling across his skin, into a massive gray wolf with yellow eyes that gleamed with malice. His lips pulled back from fangs the length of daggers. Zane tried to shift. His body, convulsed, bones starting to break and reshape, but the transformation stuttered, incomplete. His scream was half human, half animal, pure agony as his body fought against the poison in his system. He managed a partial shift, claws extending, fangs elongating, but his form was wrong, twisted, vulnerable. Demise pounced. They collided in a tangle of fur and flesh and fury. Demise's jaws closed around Zane's shoulder and wrenched. The sound of tearing flesh, Zane's howl of pain. Willa felt it like a knife to her own heart. Zane tried to fight back, slashing with claws that didn't fully form, but Demis was relentless. He drove Zane down, jaws going for his throat, going for the kill. Willa couldn't watch this. Couldn't stand here while the man she loved died in front of her, poisoned and beaten by a cheater and a coward. Training took over. She grabbed a spear from the nearest guard's hands, ignoring his startled protest, and threw herself into the ring. Willa, no. Someone grabbed, for her, but she was already moving. She hit Demise from the side, driving the spear into his flank with all her weight behind it. The blade punched through fur and muscle with a wet slide, not deep enough to kill, but enough to tear a ragged gash that made him stagger. His massive head swung toward her, lips peeling back from blood-slicked fangs. The intelligence in those yellow eyes was pure hatred, pure animal rage. He snarled, a sound that rattled in her chest, and forgot about Zane entirely. He lunged for her, 200 pounds of muscle and fury. Willa rolled, her knife already in her hand, and came up in a stance Zane had drilled into her 100 times. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She was going to die, but she'd die fighting, die protecting him. But Zane was there, impossibly fast despite the poison eating through his veins, throwing himself between her and Demise with a roar that was more rage than sound. The two wolves collided in a tangle of teeth and claws, the impact shaking the ground. But something had changed. Zane fought differently now, not with technique or strategy, but with something primal and desperate. Every strike was powered by something beyond strength, beyond survival instinct. Love. The absolute savage refusal to let anything touch his mate. He drove Demise back, taking hits he should have dodged, ignoring the claws that raked his sides. When Demise snapped at him, Zane caught his muzzle in his jaws and twisted, forcing Demise's head to the side. Demise yelped and tried to pull away, but Zane pressed his advantage. He drove Demise down onto his back, the ultimate submission position, and went for his throat. His jaws closed around Demise's windpipe and bit down. The crunch of cartilage and bone echoed across the suddenly silent challenge ground. Demis thrashed, once violently, claws scrabbling against Zane's chest. Twice weaker, a horrible gurgling sound escaping around Zane's teeth. Then his body went limp, yellow eyes glazing over. Zane held on, shaking him like a rag doll, making absolutely sure. Finally, Zane released him. Demise's body hit the ground with a wet thud, throat a ruined mess, head at an unnatural angle. Zane shifted back to human form mid-collapse, hitting his knees hard. His skin was gray, slick with sweat and blood. Black veins spiderwebbed across his chest, his arms, creeping up his neck like corruption spreading through his body. His hands trembled violently. Willa ran to him, sliding to her knees and catching him as he swayed. He was burning up, his skin fever-hot despite the shivers racking his frame. Zane, stay with me. Tears blurred her vision, streamed hot down her face. Please, please stay with me. His eyes found hers, unfocused and glassy. You're safe. Each word was a struggle, his chest heaving. That's what matters. No. She cupped his face, feeling how cold his skin was getting despite the fever. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to die on me. She looked around wildly at the frozen crowd, at the elders, at someone. Help him. There has to be a cure, an antidote, something. There is. An elder stepped forward, his expression grave. The mate bond. If completed, the magic would burn the poison from his system. But she's human. It wouldn't work. Unless she transitions, another elder said slowly. If she bonded with him and became one of us, the magic might be strong enough. All eyes turned to Willa. Her mind raced. Become a shifter. Leave her humanity behind. Bind herself to Zane and this world permanently, with no going back. She thought about Seattle, about debt and tiny apartments and the life she'd been living, about Jason and fear and the constant weight of not being enough. Then she looked at Zane, this man who'd given her strength when she had none, who'd been patient when she needed patience and fierce when she needed protection, who'd loved her without asking for anything in return, who was dying in her arms because he'd refused to let her get hurt. The choice was simple. Tell me what to do, Willa said. Willa, Zane's hand found hers weakly. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She pressed her forehead to his. I love you, Zane Ashcroft, and I'm choosing you. I'm choosing this. Now tell me how to save your life. The elder stepped closer. You need to mark him. A claiming bite at the neck, deep enough to draw blood and bind your essence to his. The magic will do the rest, but you need to mean it. The bond only works if it's genuine. Willa looked at Zane's neck, at the pulse fluttering weakly beneath ashen skin, at the black veins spreading like cracks in porcelain. She'd never been more certain of anything in her life. She leaned down, her hands bracing on either side of his head, and bit. Her teeth broke through skin and muscle, deeper than she'd intended, driven by instinct she didn't know she had. Hot blood flooded her mouth, copper and salt and something wild, something that tasted like pine forests and winter storms and raw, untamed magic. The effect was instantaneous. Power slammed into her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. The bond between them detonated, a supernova of sensation that whited out everything else. She felt Zane's pain like it was her own, a burning agony in her veins. His fear, sharp and metallic. His love, so overwhelming it nearly broke her. And beneath it all, the poison, acrid, corrupt, wrong, being consumed by something vast and ancient and absolutely merciless. Magic poured through the bond, through her bite, into him. She felt it happening, felt the wolfsbane burn away like paper in a furnace, felt new power rushing in to fill the space it left behind. But the magic didn't stop with Zane. It turned on her. Her body convulsed. Bones cracked and reformed, not breaking, but restructuring, her skeleton reshaping itself from the inside out. Her scream came out as something between human and animal. Every nerve ending ignited at once. Her spine arched, vertebrae popping one by one. Her jaw ached, teeth sharpening. Something primal and ancient clawed its way to the surface of her consciousness, something that had been sleeping in her DNA, waiting for this exact moment. Wolf. Zane's arms came around her, solid, real, grounding, holding her through the transformation. His voice in her ear, rough and urgent. I've got you. I've got you. Let it happen. Don't fight it. She didn't know how long it lasted, but gradually, agonizingly, the pain receded. Her body settled into its new configuration. Her breathing steadied. When Willa finally pulled back, gasping, she saw Zane's eyes were clear. Amber, not clouded. His skin had color again, the gray replaced by healthy tan. The black veins were gone, leaving only faint silver scars where they'd been. The poison was gone. He was alive. You saved me, he said hoarsely, his hand coming up to cup her face. You saved me first. She touched his face, marveling at how she could suddenly smell everything. His scent like pine in winter storms, the blood on the ground, the fear and relief radiating from the crowd. I can feel it. The bond. It's real. It's real. Zane pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go. And you're mine. My mate. My queen. The pack erupted in cheers. Someone called for healers, others for celebration. but Willa barely heard them. She was too focused on Zane, on the bond humming between them, on the certainty that she'd made the right choice. 3 days later, Willa stood on the battlements watching the sunrise, a cup of tea warming her hands. Her body still ached from the transition, her senses still adjusting to their new sharpness. But she felt strong, powerful, somehow more herself than she'd ever been. Zane's arms came around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "How are you feeling?" "Different. Good different." She leaned back into his warmth. "I can hear everything, smell everything. It's overwhelming but amazing. It gets easier." He kissed her temple. "Give it time." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Willa said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I had a nursing degree. Well, half of one. And there are people here who need medical care, especially in the outer villages." She turned in his arms. "What if I finished my training, became a healer for the pack?" "You'd be incredible at that. And I want to start a combat program for anyone who wants to learn self-defense, especially for people who've been hurt and need to feel strong again." She paused. "Like you did for me." Zane's expression softened. "You're going to change this kingdom, Willa." "We're going to change it," she corrected. "Together." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both smiling, Willa caught sight of movement in the courtyard below. Brayden was leading a group through combat, drills, and among them, moving with newfound confidence, was a young woman Willa recognized. She'd met her 2 weeks ago in the kitchens, Maya, one of the castle staff. Willa had been getting water after training when she'd noticed the bruises on the woman's wrists, the way she flinched when a door slammed. They'd talked quietly while Maya kneaded bread, and eventually Maya had asked, voice barely above a whisper, "How did you get so strong? How did you stop being afraid?" Willa had told her about the training, about learning to fight back, about how it felt to reclaim your own body, your own power. Now, watching Maya execute a defensive stance with determined precision, seeing her face light up with pride, Willa felt something warm expand in her chest. This was why she'd stayed. For Zane, but also for this. The chance to make a difference, to help others find their strength the way she'd found hers. "Want to go for a run?" Zane asked, his eyes lighting up with boyish enthusiasm. "I could show you what it's like to move as a wolf in daylight. Really move." "I'd love that." They shifted together, his transformation smooth and practiced, a fluid ripple of power. Hers still hitched and stuttered, bones protesting the change, but it was getting easier each time. When she finally stood on 4 legs and looked at the world through wolf eyes, she had to stop and just feel it. Everything was sharper, richer, almost overwhelming. She could smell individual pine needles, the mineral scent of distant snow, the warm musk of Zane beside her. Colors were muted, but textures were impossibly vivid. And sounds. She could hear a bird's heartbeat 3 trees away. Zane, massive and black-furred in his wolf form, bumped his head against hers affectionately, a low, pleased rumble vibrating through his chest. His amber eyes were warm, patient. "Ready?" She could almost hear him asking through the bond. Then he took off running. Willa's instinct was to chase, her paws finding easy, purchase on stone and earth. They ran through the citadel gates and into the forest beyond, and this time she wasn't afraid of falling or failing. Her body knew what to do, powerful muscles bunching and releasing, claws gripping terrain, her whole being designed for this. Zane stayed close at first, circling back when she stumbled, waiting when she needed to catch her breath. But as her confidence grew, so did her speed. She pushed harder, faster, feeling the pure joy of movement singing through her veins. He led her through trees and across shallow streams where cold water splashed against her belly. Sometimes he'd veer close and nip playfully at her shoulder, and she'd snap back, clumsy but eager. Once she actually managed to bowl him over, more by accident than skill, and his surprised huff of laughter through the bond made her tail wag despite herself. When they finally stopped in a sun-drenched clearing, both panting and exhilarated, Willa shifted back to human form. The change left her breathless, grinning, more alive than she'd ever felt. Zane followed suit, and they stood facing each other in the dappled sunlight, both flushed and completely, perfectly happy. "This is incredible," Willa said breathlessly, still feeling the phantom sensation of forelegs, of wind in her fur. "I've never felt so free." "You're a natural." Zane crossed to her, brushing a leaf from her hair. "I love watching you discover this. Discover yourself." "I couldn't have done any of this without you." She reached up to cup his face. "You gave me everything." "No." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "You were always this strong, this brave. I just reminded you." She kissed him then, slow and deep, tasting sunlight and forest and promise on his lips. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt his protectiveness and passion warring in the way he held her, like he wanted to shelter her and devour her all at once. When they came together there in the clearing, soft moss beneath them and golden light filtering through leaves above, it was different from before. The bond amplified everything, every touch, every sensation. She felt his pleasure as her own, felt his overwhelming love wrapping around her like something tangible and warm. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with leaves rustling overhead, Willa thought about the woman she'd been 4 weeks ago, broken, afraid, certain she'd never be more than the sum of her mistakes. That woman would never have believed this was possible. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, "for giving me time, for teaching me how to fight for myself instead of fighting for me." She lifted her head to look at him. "For loving me when I didn't know how to love myself." Zane's hand cupped her face. "You did the hard part, Willa. You chose to trust again, to hope again. That took more courage than any fight I've ever seen." "We're both brave, then." "We are." He kissed her forehead. "And we're going to do incredible things together. Build a kingdom where people don't have to be afraid, where strength comes from lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down." They stayed there until the sun was high, talking about the future they'd build. The healer's clinic Willa would establish, the combat programs she'd run, the reforms Zane wanted to implement, making the pack stronger through unity rather than fear. When they finally made their way back to the Citadel, hand in hand, Willa thought about the portal, about the life she'd left behind, the debt, the fear, the careful smallness of her existence. She'd stumbled through a shimmering bookshelf running from one nightmare, certain she was falling into another. She'd been wrong. She glanced at Zane, at the easy strength in his stride, the way his thumb traced absent circles on her hand. Thought about the knife at her hip, the wolf under her skin, the bone-deep certainty that she could protect herself now. At the Citadel gates, Zane pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of the entire pack, unhurried, possessive, proud. No apology, no hesitation, just a clear declaration. Mine. A month ago, that would have terrified her. Now, with the bond humming between them and her own strength rediscovered, it just felt right. She'd fallen through a portal and found herself. Everything else, the man, the magic, the mountains, was just the world catching up to who she'd always been meant to be. Can you rate this story from 1 to 10? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.